Welcome to Talking Science, where we dive into the latest news from space and science. Operations scientist at Parkes, John Sarkisian, has beamed in as we continue our look at the dish. John, thanks for your time.
It's a pleasure, Matthew.
Well, before we get into it, a quick reminder that you can get behind-the-scenes goss and early access to all Trek Zone podcasts by becoming a member today. Click the join button on any Trek Zone video, go to the TrekZone/support, or put your phone up to the QR code on screen throughout the show. John, what does an operations scientist do at Parkes?
Okay, well, as an operations scientist, my role is to look after essentially the astronomers who use the telescope, make sure that they're familiar with the instrument, they know how to use it, that the equipment is working for them, and that astronomers are able to get the best possible data from their observations. We help develop new techniques, new procedures, basically to do everything possible so that the astronomers go away happy that they've got the best results,
Well, Parkes, or Murayung, is one of 4 instruments making up the Australia Telescope National Facility. Celebrating 50 years of operation this year, Parkes is, I believe. What is the dish studying right now?
Okay, well, the telescope's actually 60 years old this year, and it was commissioned back in October 1961. And when it was built, it was the second largest but most advanced radio telescope in the world. And from its very inception, within just the first year alone, it made discoveries that really established its reputation. It discovered the magnetic field of the Milky Way galaxy, for example. It also identified the very first quasar, the most distantly known objects in the universe. And then in December of '62, just over a year later, it tracked the very first interplanetary spacecraft, Mariner 2, when it flew by Venus. And to this day, we're still doing world-class science here. It attracts the very best astronomers in the world. They want to use the instrument because of our location and the quality of the instrumentation that our engineers develop and so on. We're able to do world-class work here. The center of the Milky Way passes almost directly overhead from Parkes, and so we get to see the richest, most interesting parts of the Milky Way from here. It's easily accessible for us. Also, the location is near ideal. It was in the 50s when he chose it because it was free of radio frequency interference, and the climatic conditions here were just almost perfect for the operation of a large antenna like Parkes. And today, the work that we do is just carrying on that legacy, a world-class science legacy, and so on. So, for example, some of one of the major discoveries we've made here just in recent years was the discovery of fast radio bursts. These really enigmatic single bursts of energy that only last about a millisecond or so, but they appear to come from some of the most distant objects in the universe. At the moment, it's a mystery what creates these things, but there are a lot of theories to try and explain it. And Parkes discovered the first in 2007. And for the next few years, it was the only instrument discovering these things. And so now, however, other observatories and astronomers have joined the hunt for these enigmatic objects, and they're coming up with new discoveries and new explanations for these things. So it's absolutely fascinating, for me at least, to be witness to an entirely new field of radio astronomy developing right before our eyes. It's not often you get to do that. I once had a discussion with Professor Ron Eckers, the previous director of the observatory here, and it had been many decades since a new phenomenon had been discovered. But with the discovery of fast radio bursts here at Parkes, that changed. And it's really quite exciting, the work that we're doing here. We're also building new instruments, new receivers that give us a wider bandwidth, or we allow us to see more of the sky simultaneously, so we can perform surveys much more rapidly than in the past. One new instrument that we're commissioning later this year is the cryogenic PAF, the phased array feed. We'll be able to project up to 72 radio beams on the sky simultaneously with our instrument. Wow. And that'll mean that we can do surveys 72 times faster than a conventional radio telescope can. So The discoveries that we'll make with that will be absolutely phenomenal, I'm sure. We're always making discoveries with the instrument. It's an extremely versatile instrument. We can do many different types of observations with it. And we can switch between those observations very quickly. And so one minute where we're searching for alien civilizations, the next minute where we could be studying fast radio bursts, and then the next project we could be doing mapping the galactic plane or something. And then another boat we could switch and track spacecraft, lunar landers on landing on the moon in the next few years. So that's what's so exciting about Parkes. It's an incredibly versatile instrument, and an instrument that has a great legacy, but also a great future ahead of it in terms of what we're planning and what we hope to be able to do with it. I say it's 60 years old, but the only thing that's 60 years old of the telescope is the concrete and steel that it's made of. Everything else about the telescope is extremely young because we're constantly upgrading the telescope. Both the external structure, but also the interior equipment and so on. When the telescope was built, the only recording instruments we had were chart recorders. And now, of course, we have cryogenically cooled receivers, fiber optic lines, fully computer controlled, fiber lines that transport terabytes of data every day across the world. And we even operate the telescope over the internet today. So that the combined upgrades, both internal and external, have made the telescope today over 10,000 times more sensitive than when it was built. And and as I said, hardly a week or a month goes by without us upgrading something on the telescope. When they built the telescope, they only expected it to last 20 years. And so now we're 40 years past that. And with the instruments we're commissioning and the upgrades we're doing on the telescope, we fully expect the telescope to continue to be operating for at least another 10 or 20 years or so. And it's that great legacy of discovery, that great legacy of achievement that we've had with the telescope. It's a source of great pride for Australians in general. And it's an iconic symbol of Australian science, of Australian achievement. And again, that's the other reason why last year it was listed in the National Heritage list, as a symbol of that Australian science and achievement.
In 1962, NASA tasked the dish with keeping an ear out for Mariner 2 as it flew by Venus, as you mentioned. 7 years later, it was the prime receiving station for Apollo 11, and most recently in 2018-19, it supported Tidbinbilla in receiving Voyager 2 as it crossed the solar system boundary. John, is astronomical research or hearing from spacecraft more exciting for you?
Well, for me, it's the one and the same, you see, because I grew up I was 6 years old when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin stepped onto the moon. I remember watching it at school. It was a cold winter's day, very dark, raining, very much like today, actually. And I remember sitting cross-legged on the cold wooden floor in our assembly room. I was only in first class, and we watched those pictures. And so for me, over the ensuing years when I studied, when I became interested in astronomy, I would read about the Apollo missions and the probes traveling to the planets and so on, but also about the astronomers like Galileo, Newton, and Kepler, and so on. And so for me, the two were synonymous. And so, space travel and astronomy were just two sides of the one coin, And so when I came here in 25 years ago, in 1996, to work here, I came here to work on the Galileo mission to Jupiter, where Parkes was contracted to track the spacecraft around Jupiter for 10 hours every day for 1 year, because the big antenna on the spacecraft failed to unfurl. And so and while here also, I got involved in pulsar timing projects and also the multi-beam surveys and other things. And so for me, it was like the realization of the dream where we could combine the two, where we could combine astronomy, which I have a great passion for, with space travel, which is the thing that inspired me originally. And so the great thing about it for me was I could do both. And I remember in 1977 when Voyager 2 was launched. It was launched on the same week that in the same week that Elvis Presley died. So everyone else was obsessing over Elvis Presley. I was fascinated about Voyager 2 launching. Little did I know, 42 years later, we'll be exiting the solar system, passing through the heliopause into interstellar space, and that I'd be at Parkes helping track that spacecraft. And that was something that, if you had told my 15-year-old self back in 1977, I would never have believed you.
Well, incredibly, the dish operates 24 hours a day through rain and clouds. Excess wind can be a bit of an issue, but usually there's less than 5% downtime each year. That means that you and the team are kept very busy, John.
We are, we operate 24 hours a day because, I tell people, unlike optical astronomy, we can often work in civilized hours. Okay. At my age, you don't want to be up at 2 or 3 in the morning doing this. And so, no, we operate 24 hours a day. And the astronomers nowadays, like in the past, up until 8 years ago, they had to actually be at the telescope to use the telescope. They would travel from wherever they were in the world to Parkes, stay for a week or two or whatever, do their observations and then leave. But nowadays, because we operate over the internet, they can stay wherever they are. And so people who normally would have been observing at 2 or 3 in the morning can still observe 2 or 3 in the morning for us here in Parkes, but it'll be, lunchtime for them wherever they happen to be. And so it makes it a lot easier for us. The Parkes telescope is essentially just looks like a glorified beach umbrella. And just like a beach umbrella, when the wind blows, it puts a lot of force, a lot of loading on the telescope. And so when the winds reach a certain critical speed, we just automatically stop the observation and drive it up to the safe position and wait for the wind to come down. The windiest time of the year is in our summer months, from about November to February, and the least windy times are the winter, from about May to August or so. So we're in the least windy part of the year at the moment. And it doesn't matter if it's daytime or night, it's pretty much the same for us. And even the clouds don't bother us as long as we're not observing at very high frequencies. It's all fine. So really, the only climatic thing that could really disrupt their observations is the wind, and that only accounts for about 3 to 5% of the observing time lost because of that.
Well, just lastly, John, have you ever played cricket on the dish?
Yes. Well, that's the most commonly asked question we get asked. The answer, unfortunately, will have to be no, except for when we do publicity for the telescope. We always go up with little Smurf balls so we don't damage the dish surface. I remember in 2009 we had Mike Whitney here, the former test bowler for Australia, for his Sydney Weekender program, and we recreated that scene in the film for him, and I actually bowled him out. I bowled him, so he wasn't used to little Smurf ball. I bowled him, and then I had to go at batting and actually hit the ball over the thing. So that was the highlight of my cricketing career. But I think I'll leave it there. I'll end on a high note.
Exactly. Fantastic, John. It's incredible to think that Parkes is here. It's in Wiradjuri country as well, and doing some amazing stuff, and still to this day. Looking forward to Artemis, looking forward to commercial lunar missions. There's so much going on, as well as astronomical research. I really appreciate a little bit of your time today for Talkin' Science Fest. Thanks for beaming into TrekZone.
No, it's been a great pleasure, Matthew, and I wish you all well. Thank you.
Keep up to date with Twitter. Catch new podcasts daily on YouTube. Plus, we're beaming to your favorite podcast app 5 days a week. Just search for TrekZone and subscribe.